right, everybody. Welcome to Cars on Call. I am automotive journalist Steve Schutz, and we are joined by trauma surgeon Stephan Moran, who is operating these days on wood.
That's right. Band-aid on my finger. That's all on my fingertip.
He's the wood surgeon.
And Adam Hudson, automotive collector connoisseur expert. Um, and while Stefan has been operating on wood, you've been operating with your new 993 Porsche 911.
I have indeed. I've had some fun with that car. And in case you wondered,
There it is.
there it sits. And I was telling the folks before we got to recording that today was my first day to really drive it. I've had it a couple, 3 weeks and just hadn't had time, but got it out today. And boys and girls, you just sort of forget what a lightweight car, 300 horsepower, and very direct tactile feeling, steering and shifting and braking just feels like. And, we're not going to spend the entire episode talking about it, but I get it about the whole air-cooled mystique and magic. I've had a bunch of them over the years. I didn't know what I had missed not having one. I hadn't had an air-cooled car for a little bit. And it just, I don't know, there's a feel, there's a sound, there's a smell, the way the doors shut, the way the controls click. It's just, you are in touch with that automobile and it's fun.
I love that car. We're going to talk Nissan because Nissan is on the ropes, and we're going to get into that. Of course, we're the only podcast that has a trauma surgeon who's operated on many, many car crash victims and has done actual published research on car accidents, car crashes rather, and the science behind them. So we'll talk safety, of course, with Dr. Stephan Moran, and then we've got a car spotting. And if there's time, I have a BMW 1990s advertising story, and I was reminded of it by Instagram. So we got to start with Nissan, guys. Nissan, there was a report, I think from Forbes, that said that two insiders said that if Nissan doesn't turn things around, they've got 12 to 14 months to live, and they are in serious trouble. Sales are down. We'll talk about that with actual data. But everybody knows Nissan is in trouble. They have a lot of trouble with Nissan, the brand. They have a lot of trouble with Infiniti. Their cars are not catching fire. They're not, I shouldn't say that in the world of BEV fires. They are not selling well. Nothing is exciting about them. And I want to show, and you guys remember this, I want to show some great hits from the past. Nissan used to be Datsun. Datsun had some amazing, amazing cars. Um, There's a 240Z. Nissan had some, or Datsun had some kind of quirky small cars like all the Japanese did. So, Subaru, Toyota, they all had these kind of weird cars in the 60s that came to America, and they never caught on because they were ugly and underpowered and tended to rust. But the engines and transmissions would go forever, and they got good gas mileage. Well, the 240Z was sleek and cool. It was the first Japanese car that became really, really cool. If you scroll down, these are not my pictures. So,
These are not I thought they're your pictures.
no, but that works.
Oh, here we go.
I don't know who picked those out, but I had very similar pictures. That may be yours. I just don't know the sequence. Mine, I know the sequence, but we picked the same.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I got it.
We picked the same cars. Yeah, there's a 240Z. I had a 1972 240Z inline six, 2.4 liter inline six. Beautiful car, 4-speed manual. It was such a great car to drive. I absolutely loved it.
And people, Steve, I want to take you out of your rhythm here. People forget what an impact this car made. I mean, it landed on the shores amid a lot of competition of MGs and Triumphs and Alfa Romeos and Fiats and Porsche. Everybody had a sports car, and that got a lot of people into the showrooms and got a lot of interest. And when the 240 came out, I mean, what it was pitted against was, a 914 with about 86 horsepower, an MGB with 98 horsepower, a TR6 with 105, an Alfa Romeo might have had 115 on its best day. This car came out with 150 horsepower. Of course, it's nothing today, but it just killed the competition. It wasn't an incremental jump. It was a geometric leap, and it was priced, like right alongside these other cars. They could not sell them fast enough. This is when dealers just ruled, if you had a 240, if you had a Datsun franchise, you were just king when this car came out. Just did a
That,
lot. Very
that is
special.
so true. This car, and then the 260Z and the 280Z, and then the Mazda RX-7 killed English sports cars.
Yeah, killed, put them under. Yep.
And
You know,
then they got mainstream 70s and 80s. If you scroll down a little bit more, Stefan, I don't know why, I put these in order, and of course iCloud or something mixed them up. Keep scrolling and you'll see, there it is, 510 from the that's a early 70s. These a Datsun 510, a practical car this was right up against the 2002 BMW, don't you think,
Yes,
guys?
it was.
It handled well, it was well built, it had decent power.
Yep. And Nissan, Datsun slash Nissan was really after BMW. They wiped, like you said, they wiped a lot of English sports cars off the map with the 240, but then they were after the German sports coupe, sports sedan, whichever category you want to put it in. This car was nipping at the heels of 2002s on racetracks and showrooms just its entire existence.
Yes, and emphasis that they raced them. They raced and they succeeded in racing. I remember Bob Sharp had Paul Newman, and they raced Z cars starting in the 70s and went all the way through the 80s into the 90s. Very successful pairing, those two. The Datsun raced, you just scroll a little bit higher. That's a Nissan Maxima. That's a station wagon. But in the 80s, the Maxima became a very successful mainstream car. And then I have the 300ZX from the mid 90s above that. So they did really, really well. I'm not going to belabor this, but they became a very successful Japanese company. I would say second only to Toyota. You know, Honda was right up there with them. Toyota really started in the 80s, kind of took over. But Honda and Nissan were very, very successful companies, and they continued to grow and be mainstream. They did have trouble because of the currency disparities with the dollar starting in the late 90s. The Europeans had the same problem. And
Mhm.
then starting in 2000, they hired a new CEO. His name was Carlos Ghosn, and he came over from Renault and he took over Nissan, and he ended up running Renault and Nissan concurrently. Did very, very well financially. He did a couple things that I would give him credit for as an enthusiast. He decided, hey, in order to, don't show that picture yet. In order to,
I'm sorry to say he looks guilty in that picture. You don't even have to know what he did.
yeah, I'll get the Carlos going. But in order to make enthusiasts happy, he said, we're going to make a new Nissan GTR, which had been around since the 70s. And he made it a global car. And so it was never sold in North America until Carlos Ghosn said, we're going to do it. We're going to have a new GTR. And then for Renault, he said, we need an Alpine. And the new Alpine A110, that was him saying to Renault, we need to make this car and make it good. He really did a great job of making Renault and Nissan profitable. He's made mistakes along the way. Sure, he maybe pissed off some people outside of Nissan, but overall, he did a very good job making those companies successful. And in 2018, he, with Nissan and Renault behind him, that he was ready to buy Fiat Chrysler when Fiat Chrysler was coming up for sale. They wanted the Elkin family, which is uh, descendants of Agnelli. They're like, we got to sell this, and he was in deep conversation with them. He was going to buy Fiat Chrysler, and in November 2018, his company set him up, and he was arrested in Japan and charged and thrown in prison. Okay, the chart that Stefan's going to put up soon. There he is. There he is. The day of his arrest is a direct result of this. Here's, and guys, this is my take, but listen, I think it's true. If you arrest your CEO, especially a CEO like that, and you throw him in jail, you are going to have a very, very significant brain drain. You know what that means? How many layers of executives got their job because of him and owed their job to him? They're all going to leave. And layers of executive with all the knowledge and all the expertise and the plans and what they were going to do They just said, see you later. And they lost at least 2 years of progress because so many people left. And here we are. It's now 6 years later, and the roosters have come home to roost. Chickens, whatever the hell you say. They are fucked because they had their CEO arrested.
Yeah. Steve, can you go into any of the allegations as to why he was arrested? Can you tell the folks that may not have been following that story?
That's the worst part. He
It
was
is the worst
arrested for stealing money from the company, essentially embezzlement. He stole $0. And what he did was he and the CFO, who's an American, set up this deferred compensation plan. Now, in the world of automotive executives back in 2018, and let's say the 5 years prior to that, they're all making about 20 to $30 million a year. He's making about, from Nissan, he's making like 5 to 10, and he's making maybe less than that from Renault. So with combined running these two companies, he's making probably 60 to 70% of what GM's CEO would make and other CEOs around the world. So he tried to set up this thing and again, deferred compensation, no money was paid, and the deferred compensation plan was approved by the board. And the idea was that, okay, maybe they didn't know everything, and that's why he was arrested. So they went to some not board members, some other executives who were under him who didn't like him, just went to a prosecutor in Japan and said, hey, this guy's stealing money. And then he got arrested and charged. He didn't steal anything yet. Maybe he was going to, maybe he wasn't. By the way, Adams, I'm glad you asked that. Let's say he was going to steal money. He hadn't stolen it yet, but let's say they looked at it and absolutely, this was theft, okay? It hadn't occurred yet, but it was going to be theft. Here's what a board would do in any other circumstance. They'd say to the guy, listen, okay, we just found this out. We didn't approve it. We don't like it. You got to go. And he would leave.
Yeah.
Because they had him arrested, they lost billions of dollars amount of market capitalization in the first year. And I don't think they've still recovered any of it. It was financially the stupidest thing they could have done.
And lots of bad press too.
Yeah. And then, you know, the ripple effects of that are exactly what we're seeing now. You know, that chart right there kind of illustrates it. But, you know, when you throw your CFO in jail, or when you do a global manhunt for your CEO, and it looks as if he's guilty, even if he's entirely innocent, it's kind of like what happened with with the Audi and the unintended acceleration. The news was bad enough that if it were true, it would be terrible. And it turns out it's not true. Well, the damage has already been done. And that's certainly what happened to him. And it's too bad. And deferred compensation, of course, is anybody who's listening to this, it hasn't happened yet. It was based on performance goals and outcome. And since it hadn't happened, it's not like he took the money past tense and then they said, hey, this guy's a criminal. It hadn't even come to him yet, which is just more insane.
The graph shows a significant drop, and Nissan is going from selling on track for around 300,000 cars per year. They're now dropping down. They'll probably down around 200,000, which is just a nightmare. And this is per quarter, so I'm talking about per quarter, not per year. But again, they should be selling $400,000 cars per quarter, and they're down below almost to 200, below 200,000. And Nissan is a joke. Nissan, just for comparison, BMW is going to win the race for luxury car sales in 2024. They'll be around 350,000 cars. It would be, to me, a miracle if Infiniti breaks 100,000.
Wow. Yep. Yep. Well, it's too dang bad, because I remember I worked at a Nissan dealership in the late 80s. And you could honestly get a person who was cross-shopping a BMW 3 Series into the showroom, put them in a Maxima with leather, a 5-speed, and 150, 160 horse V6. That was the Q family motor. And it would there you go. That was not an unattractive car in the mid late 80s.
That's a great car. They were fantastic.
I thought so too. Now, it was front wheel drive. That's the only probably negative you could say from a performance perspective, but they would run. They sounded good. They felt good. The switchgear was good. The comfort was good. The handling was just taut enough. You could get an S or an SE. I forget what they call their kind of sporting version. But that car could really compare very favorably with 121 horsepower BMW 3 Series, the base 3 Series at the time, the 325. It was just a very good car, and they sold the living fire at them as a result.
Yeah, they sold a lot of cars. For years in the 2000s, the best-selling car in Europe was the Nissan Qashqai. Very, very successful. Carlos Ghosn had problems. Yeah, he introduced and pushed a CVT, continuously variable transmission, that had all kinds of quality problems. Their quality did not improve. It got worse under him. So he wasn't a perfect CEO, but he was making money and he was moving. Just imagine if they'd been able to merge with Fiat Chrysler, it would have been incredible, and they would be even more successful today. No CEO is perfect, but he was pretty damn good.
And then they put out a car like this, Adam. This is the picture of the Nissan Cube.
And if you don't have visuals, just imagine a loaf of bread with tail lights.
Yeah, just a weird design. And then, and our favorite convertible, the Nissan Murano convertible. This is I saw one of those in real life one time, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is the ugliest looking car convertible.
Indeed, yeah.
It's awful.
And that's from the Nissan website. That's as good as it can look. That is the photography from the website that was promoting that car in a press package.
Right.
Right. Let's go on to safety.
All right, let me get my screens rearranged here. So it's been all over Reuters, and all kind of different variations have been released of this fatality database run by NHTSA. They basically look at it's called Fatality Reporting System, and they looked at data from 2018, 2022 with crashes that result in at least one occupant death to identify the most dangerous vehicles on the U.S. roads today. And they release this, and it's kind of, we're going to go through some of this data. You kind of got to take it with a look. You got to understand kind of what you're looking at. But so the way this works is the FARS database has what are called inflation factors. So, and the reason this will make sense to you, so here I've got on the first slide, cars with the most frequent occupant fatalities. Number one, the Hyundai Venue fatal accident rate, cars per billion vehicle miles, 13.9. Well, you can tell that's a lot of miles, okay? So in order to get up to this number of 1 billion vehicle miles, they apply inflation factors to the raw data. So this is not raw data. This is raw data sampling, then they then apply inflation factors to come up with a denominator and a numerator. So this is not actual death. But what you do is when you apply these inflation factors across the spectrum, you then can have comparative data as to relative rates. So it's kind of a statistical, it's common in the statistical world. This is the way you handle this kind of data. But what's interesting when you look at this, and it's kind of like, what do you want to take away from this? So, well, the Hyundai Venue 5 times the overall fatal accident rate of the other vehicles. Well, small compact sedan. Okay. There's just, who makes small sedans anymore? Ford doesn't even make a car anymore.
Well, let's say it's like a crossover. It's like a boxy thing.
It's a boxy thing, but it's the latest, but it's small. Then the Corvette. Okay. Well, anyway, a Corvette, why does a Corvette make the list? Well, I was kind of surprised here because I imagine your standard Corvette driver, it's the secretary or it's a 70-year-old guy with shorts and crew socks on his way to play golf. But they are driven fast. They lose control, high performance vehicle.
Stephan, statistics correctly, would we be saying the cars per billion vehicle miles? Does that mean that there were way fewer Hyundai Venues, because there are more Hyundai Venues, entered into this equation than there would have been Chevrolet Corvettes because there's fewer of them and they're driven fewer miles per year?
What they do is that there's fewer of them driven fewer fewer miles, but they apply the inflation factor so that you can have a direct comparison to a Hyundai Venue.
Oh, okay.
Right. That's
Well, I'm surprised to see number 2 and number 4 on there, but go ahead.
yeah, but so it's not so it's why you have to kind of it's interesting to look at this data. Remember, this is not raw data. This is a sampling of crashes. Then they inflate the numbers via different factors and rates to get to this cars per billion vehicle miles.
Gotcha.
But but you look at there, you can see the Corvette and the 911 are probably right behind the Mustang, which I'm surprised didn't make it here. That two of the highest selling performance vehicles. I mean, and people drive these cars fast. But the interesting thing when you look at all these vehicles here, they all have 4- and 5-star ratings. So the vehicles are extremely safe, and not one of these has got a terrible rating. So you really have to start looking into behavior, vehicle size, vehicle mismatch. And you look at these are all pretty small vehicles across the board, except for the Tesla Model Y. They're not gigantic vehicles. And then they did look at vehicle size, which we clearly makes sense that the smaller the car, the higher the higher the fatal accident rate. That we've known that for a long time. That's the old, you can't defy Newton's laws of physics. Momentum is mass times velocity, and kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared, and that's why speeding in the wrong place at the wrong time is deadly. But also, you imagine if you're in a small car and you get hit by a Chevy Suburban, who's going to win that battle. So that makes perfect sense. This is SUVs with the most frequent occupant fatalities. The Hyundai Venue right up there again. And then the CRV, the Tesla Model Y, and then it goes on down the list. But once again, the smaller vehicles, even SUVs. This gets a little more interesting. Look at trucks with the most frequent occupant fatalities. That you get the Nissan Frontiers kind of leading the pack at 2.2 over the Ford Ranger and the Colorado. But once again, if you look at these are small trucks. These are not the big trucks, and that makes sense. Once again, smaller is not in a collision is not better.
And I think Steve may know this. A Frontier and a Ranger are basically the same vehicle, are they not?
No, they're similar size, but they're not.
Used to share, they were platform shared cars.
No, that was the Mazda. There was a Mazda truck
Oh,
that was.
thank you. That's correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what I was thinking.
But they're similar. But it's a good point though. I mean, the Colorado, the Ranger, and the Frontier are similar size.
Oh, small, yeah. And during this time, the Maverick wasn't out. The Hyundai, what is it? The Santa Fe.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those would be at the top of this list because they're smaller once again.
Now, there was a time, Steph, that the rollover standards for trucks were different than the rollover standards for cars. Is that still
Correct?
Okay.
Now the roller, so they I can't remember what year that changed. That's been a while back where they had to change the rollover. Yes. And then we get down, and here interesting. This is automakers with the most frequent occupant fatalities. And this was really interesting to me because right up there at number 1 and number 2, basic, not much difference, Tesla and Kia.
Hmm.
I think Kia is easily explained by the number of small vehicles that they sell. They definitely sell lower end vehicles. They're as well as nice high end vehicles, but they as a manufacturer still have a lot of small vehicles. Tesla is interesting, and I think the way for me to kind of wrap my head around Tesla is I would have to blame the full self-driving mode. That I think 2 big factors in the Tesla. Number 1 is it's autopilot and features, which we see a lot of people doing stupid things in that. But the other thing is Tesla is such a game changer in the way that you interact with a vehicle that I think it driver distraction is going to be way higher in a Tesla. And I mean, because when you get into a Tesla, it's like not getting into a car that you have any familiarity with. The way it drives, the way it sounds, the way that you change the vents and all this with the big giant, you've got basically a TV screen right there to look at to your right. So I would have to, think that that's the reason that Tesla, made number 1. It has to be, in my mind, 2 factors. Number 1 is the driver distraction because of the interface, new technology. And then the second of all would be over-reliance on the technology. And we clearly have seen that with the Tesla, that the software fails at times. And
I would add to that, Stefan, and I obviously agree with all that. It makes sense. But for the same reason that perhaps Corvette and the Porsche 911 are listed as because they're fast. Well, they're not as fast as some of the Teslas. So,
good, great point, Steve-O.
there was a famous case in Texas. I don't know if you guys remember this, about 3 years ago, where a anesthesiologist had his money manager over for dinner. So the money manager and the wife came over to a dinner party at this guy's house. And the guy said, "Hey, I got this new Tesla. Let's check it out." So they drove through their subdivision, through the anesthesiologist's subdivision, and crashed the car at very high speed. Just went in off the road into the woods because he was showing him how fast the car was. And of course, the car was really fast. And then you can imagine the fire was so hot. There's probably it was basically within 30 seconds. This was the best cremation you ever saw.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, that's a great point, Steve-O. All of the, no, I shouldn't say, the higher end electric vehicles accelerate at an insane rate. I mean, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. And I mean, even the new 10,000-pound Hummer, I mean, it hauls ass. And then think about it, you've got to stop the vehicle of this size. And for there, what it all comes down to stopping these vehicles is friction. It's not the brakes, it's friction. It's where the rubber meets the road. They only have so much rubber on the road. And no matter how much weight you have, it's the rubber on the road that stops the vehicle. Because we've got the brake technology so good now that they can do anti-lock brakes, but it's a traction issue. So you're right. I think that is it's really three components: vehicles interaction with the occupant, the new technology, the over reliance on the technology, and then they just haul ass too much. They're just too fast.
There's several points every time you talk about this, it's like I think, oh, okay, well that's a dreary topic because we're looking at fatalities, but then you start thinking about, well, that applies to me because I'm out there on the road with these cars, whether I drive them or not. I am either door handle to door handle or following some of them. And if you've ever sat in a Tesla, if you're used to what I call normal cars, and then you go sit in a Tesla, like you said, the interface is different. All the ergonomics are different. Everything about the way it turns on and turns off and adjusts fan speeds and radio volume, all that is very, very different. And as we talked, just, briefly, me talking about this 993 striking me as a different sort of driving dynamic. Weight is the enemy of performance. And that means acceleration performance, but you have to have a heavy, heavy battery to get that kind of acceleration out of a car. But then you've got handling performance is grossly negatively affected, as well as braking performance and
Right.
everything about the way the car interacts with the road. Because Steph, you bring up a great point about the footprint of the tires. That's all you got, and
Right.
if you double or triple the weight, that's still all you've got. The tires didn't get any better. They're actually under more stress.
Right.
Mustang not on that first list.
Yeah, I know, because that's all you see on YouTube is Mustangs come out of Cars and Coffee losing it.
1 out of 3 Mustangs leaving a Cars in Coffee has a
Yes.
terrible accident.
I was surprised, to see that Chevy Camaro wasn't on there. Maybe, this is the sales are just they're not that many of them, but in the inflation factor, but you're right. Um,
I think you
but
off. I think you have cooked the numbers and you took the Mustang off that list.
Yeah, I think, I read a few years ago that no one died in 1 year in the United States in an Audi A4. And I thought that was interesting because I guarantee you there's certain cars that no one dies every year, like no one dies in a, let's say, Hyundai Palisade or something like that. It's kind of cool to think about that kind of thing. But, having said that, people do die in cars. The 911, I like, just like Adams, I have one. Actually, no, just like Adams, I have two. Anyway, but there was a young girl who died in a 911 because she took it from her dad, snuck out, and her dad didn't know, and then she crashed it at high speed. So you do
Mm.
hear about teenagers and stories like that where it's not the primary driver.
I tend to think about 911s as safe cars. That chart just kind of showed me differently, but I tend to think about them as very, and the Corvette too. The modern Corvette is very stiff, very robust chassis and cage, but I don't know, it's sobering statistics to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Stefan. And I do think that's going to evolve over time. More hybrids in the next 5 years. We'll see how that all changes. But it's interesting. And Adam's car spotting.
This was a car spotting. I just came out of a store. I was doing a little bit of Christmas shopping. Popped out of a store at a normal shopping center here in Florida, and there's an interesting car. When Steph brings it up,
Yeah, I'm trying to find it here.
I'm not
Just keep talking. I'll find it. I had it up and then
because I'm gonna build it up a little bit. We
build
talked
it up. Yep.
last episode about the demise of Jaguar, who has like vacated their legacy, and they have kind of turned against what had been their few remaining customers and turned off a whole lot of potential future customers. And then you look at Nissan, pretty well had the world by the tail for a period, and they have changed and deteriorated their stance on the mantle. And you look at this company of this car that Stefan is bringing up.
I had it, now it's gone.
Is that Aston?
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Okay, you just keep talking. All right, here we go. I finally found it.
Aston Martin has had a gentleman's express sort of demeanor about it for just forever. And that's what it's been. And I came out of a store and I caught this shape, and I wasn't even 100% sure what it was when I first saw it because I'd not seen one, but that's a DBS Volante, the convertible version. And it's just unbelievably good looking. I mean, it goes back to the Ian Callum design, and it's just fabulous. And, on one side, you say, well, it's a very expensive new car and a very exclusive car, very, very limited numbers. I was reading today about the V8 Vantage, which is a very affordable, like, to me, I would consider a V8 Vantage 6-speed, also a Callum design, and it doesn't look terribly dissimilar from this profile. I would not want the convertible version, but the build numbers are so low on Astons. It's unbelievable that they're even still around, still making this much exclusivity and somehow staying in business. But I don't know. What do you guys think? I think that's a super handsome looking car, even though we know it's depreciated since we first saw this photo.
I've always had a thing for two-door coupes, and Aston Martins, to me, they've always made a gorgeous, gorgeous coupe. They're a little bit, the lines are smooth and curvaceous, yet it has a little bit of aggressivity, angriness to it. It's a little bit of testosterone in it. I like them, and they're gorgeous interiors. They're kind of cramped interiors. They used to borrow a lot from different part spins. They've gotten a lot better about that. I love them. I would be scared to death to own one. Talking about maintenance.
Because of parts and reliability, or
parts and reliability. It's probably better day, but when I was in Huntsville, one of the neurosurgeons, this is back in the early 2000s, he bought one, an Aston Martin, and after like the third time he had to have it flatbedded back to Atlanta for service, he was like, "That's it, I'm done."
Oh,
but I think today you're better off. I mean, I think they're much more reliable today. But
yeah, back then they were owned by Ford, and you had basically Jaguar and Ford parts, and now the engines and transmissions are all Mercedes. My thought is this: I think they were killed by Volkswagen, and here's what I mean. If you're going to buy one of these, what else are you looking at? You're looking at Porsche and you're looking at Ferrari. Well, those two haven't really changed. So Aston Martin, when it was just Ferrari and Porsche, Aston Martin did pretty well. And of course, they were helped when they were owned by Ford because they could make the cars more affordable by sharing parts. And then what happened was the emergence over the last, especially 10 years. It started 20 years ago, but it's only been the last 10 years where you have the emergence of, when I say Volkswagen, I mean subsidiaries, Lamborghini and Bentley, especially Bentley. So people who would otherwise buy an Aston Martin, again, the problem isn't Ferrari and Porsche. It's Bentley especially. And people are like, I can get a Bentley. And even to some extent, Rolls-Royce. But I think Bentley especially has just taken a lot of Aston Martin buyers and just said they're ours. And to me, that's the problem. And Aston Martin is just run out of oxygen.
Wow. And Steve, would it be fair to throw Audi into that mix? That they've also pulled a little air out of the Aston Martin balloon just
I
with the.
think I think Audi and Mercedes are too low, and BMW. I think it's you're talking 200,000 to start. I think that's Bentley territory, almost to Rolls-Royce. I don't think Audi so much, or BMW or Mercedes. I don't think.
I was thinking that the R8. I had a guy call me about 2 years ago.
R8, sure, but that's been
Well,
out of production.
owned an R8, and this guy was a Bentley fanatic. He had owned a few Aston Martins. Stefan knows him, gentleman from Montgomery, can buy whatever he wants. And he called me up and he said, I'm looking at an R8. And I said, well, why would you do that? And he said, because I can get it serviced in my hometown.
Yep.
And he just, that was his cross shopping. That was the start and stop of his cross shopping. Do you guys know what that DBS, and this is a shock to me. I'm not trying to do a quiz test here because I did not know. What do you think that DBS Volante sticker's for new?
I will say it probably T25 with $110,000 in options. So it's probably about 335.
Dang. Okay. Steven?
Well, I'm gonna go lower. I'm gonna say it starts at around 180, and the out the door was probably 200 for that car.
Three and a quarter. Stefan wins. The Price is Right. Three and a quarter. That's probably before you do a little bit of other stuff, but that was what that car.
That's kind of scratching on Rolls-Royce right there.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's huge money. I'd be in a Bentley at that price range. I'm in a Bentley.
There's my point.
Yep, exactly. Bentley Continental Super Sports. I mean, hands down.
I'm getting a cheap condo on the beach with the used RX-7.
Yeah. Well, that's a good call.
All right.
So saith the cheapskate of the trio here.
All right. Before we leave it, do you guys, I mean, 10 years from now, is Aston Martin alive or dead?
Well,
Not the Formula One team, the road car.
right. I think I don't know. They've got their little niche, but can they be profitable at that volume? That's the whole question. They need a better SUV.
Yeah.
They need to follow Porsche's mold and crank out two different size SUVs that are almost affordable.
So I say they're dead. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah.
I feel like not if, when Jaguar and Alfa Romeo get wiped off the map, I think it leaves a little bit of breathing room for Aston Martin to exist, maybe just subsist, and they're probably going to get bought out, and I kind of hope they do. I wish AMG would make a play for them. So I'm going to be the one I'm going to vote. I want them to live. That's the emotional side of it. Logically, I think it's going to be hard, but I want them to live because I really.
A boutique sports car manufacturer like that is going to have a very difficult time. Eventually, in Europe ahead of us, the internal combustion engine is going to be moved out. I mean, so it's been moved further down the road, but what separates electric sports cars from each other? I mean, the supercar, hypercar electric cars aren't selling. I mean, people just aren't really that interested. So how do you take that long bonnet design and change that to a BEV that is still desirable? And I think that's going to be very, very difficult.
Well, I think that it's almost like a tangential part of the question here. Is BEV going to be anything in 10, like what is a 10-year window on a BEV? Oh, obviously Porsche's pulling back. Jaguar is probably going to dive off their own cliff. Volvo, are they going to pull back? Or all these people who proclaimed, yay, we're embracing the BEV world. Never mind, no, we're not anymore. I mean, I think a lot of the big manufacturers pulled off of that. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Steph, but like, are we going to be seeing way, way, way fewer of those than what was projected just 2 years ago?
Well, it has to do with infrastructure. we talked about this, like Jack Roush said, the last thing you want to be doing in your car is foraging for electricity. And in this country, it's a niche vehicle with the niche places that have chargers. In Europe, I think the EU is still going to push hard on that, and the EU does so much regulation that I think they will continue with the BEV movement in Europe, but it's definitely on a different timeline than it was previously. But I think this country, I'm not worried about it in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think that there was an absolutely inexorable move away from BEVs that started about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And I think that that was like, okay, this is really kind of a dead end, and we're going to have to go to hybrids. And everyone just decided that. And then hybrids were going to be a bridge to BEVs. And now I think everyone's like, well, they're going to be a bridge to something, maybe hydrogen. But we're going to be in, I think the BEV enthusiasm lasted probably 5 years. And well, maybe 10 if you say it started with the Tesla Model S. But now we're going to be in the hybrid era, and I think that's going to be 10 years, and we don't know what it's a bridge to. But I will make one point, and I think this is really important when it comes to Europe. I think Europe has been and is really going to be majorly affected by, wait for it, the election of Donald Trump. Italy has a conservative prime minister, and they have a conservative government. Macron is deeply unpopular in France. And the only person I can think of who's a politician in Europe who's less popular than him is the guy in England who has been arresting people for their Facebook posts. So I think there's going to be a rightward shift in Europe, and that's going to put all this BEV stuff on ice for at least 5 years. That's my prediction.
I like that. BVs on ice.
Nice, yes, so to speak.
Yes.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
You're just naturally good. That's why
Yes.
I think that's a strong point, and that's one I would like to embrace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before we leave Aston Martin, I want to say I do like Aston Martin. I love them to survive. I just don't think they're going
yeah.
to. I just, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like you're watching Stefan, you're always talking about penguins. You see this penguin, and it's like you just want him to make it to the iceberg, but there's a shark coming. And at one point, you're just like, he's just not going to make it. Of course, all you want is to just get to the iceberg, man. And his mom's waiting for him, but he's just not going to make it. The shark's going to get him.
Oh, I hope he makes it. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah.
At the end of the Bond films, if he goes off,
Yeah.
done for. So we hope Aston Martin makes it.
Okay. I want to end with a little story, and this is kind of a cute story because it's a 30-year-old story, but I was reminded of it. And it's kind of funny, not funny, and maybe it's sad, and maybe it's an indictment of your co-host, Steve. But I probably get 20% of my news from Instagram, and the rest, 80%, I get from TikTok. So this was Instagram, and it showed an ad for a BMW. And if you show it, Stefan, it's a really cool ad from the 90s. We all remember this. And if you see it, near 50-50 weight distribution, and it says, oh no. But there's this BMW 3 Series is resting on what the hell do you call that? Like a
A three-pointed throwing star. I don't know.
All right, yeah, something. But it's balanced. It's perfectly balanced on this thing that's holding it, and you see a feather is dropping on the hood, and the idea is, oh no, the feather is going to disrupt the 50-50 weight balance. And it's a great ad, and I noticed it because I said, oh, that's a Mullen ad. So in 1993, my sister Erica, who lives in Manchester, Massachusetts, was working for a company called Mullen Advertising, and they did a lot of good ads. They did very fine juices. They did smart food, Timberland boots. One of my favorite ads for Timberland just showed a picture of the boot, and it was a Mullen ad, and it said there's no such thing as artificial weather. They had really, really good ads. But Jim Mullen, who started the company in the 70s, was a racer. He raced IMSA. He was a car enthusiast, and all he wanted was a good car brand, but it had to be the right one. So the BMW account came up for review in 1993, and he was one of the finalists, and the company was one of the finalists. And very famously, when the BMW people came to hear their pitch at their building, and it was not in a city. It was outside of Boston, kind of a rural area. They walked up the pathway to the front door, and they walked past 8 very significant historic BMWs from dating, way back, whenever BMW was formed. And then they walked past that, and then they walked into a courtyard, and then they had painted the BMW logo on the floor of the courtyard before they walked in. And I knew they pitched it, and Jim Mullen is a very interesting guy, and they got the ad, they got the account. I was talking to Eric about it recently, and she said, yeah, she goes, we knew things were good when the guy making the decision, CEO of BMW North America, walked past the logo, walked up to the second floor, looked down on the logo, ran back out to his car to get a camera. And he took a picture of all the cars and the logo, and then they got the account. They did great work just like this. And my story is, it was the first time I drove an M car because of Jim Mullen. There's another ad. The new M3 isn't just built for car fanatics, it's built by them. And they just had great ads, and they were very persuasive. And this is a time of growth for BMW. So anyway, I came to visit in 1994, and Erica took me to Mullen, and Jim Mullen didn't know me, but Erica told him I was a car enthusiast, and it's a pretty small agency. So I was walking up with Elisa, my wife, to the front door, and the door opens, and this guy comes out. Just look, he was dressed up, but look, businessman. And he walked up and said, "You must be Steve." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Erica said you're a big car guy." And I said, "Yeah, I like cars, I love cars." And he said, "Oh my gosh, you gotta drive my car. I just got the new M5, and this is the E34 edition, so it was the second generation M5." And I said, "Okay," because he knew I was going out to lunch with my sister, and it was like 11:30. So I said, "Thank you. It's a great car. When do you want it back by?" And it was 11:30, and he gets a serious look, and he goes, "Hmm." He goes, "I have to be out of here by 5." So I'm like, "What? What?" I'm like, I was at the time 30, 33 years old or something, 31, too. I don't know. I would have been actually 30. So I took the car. It was the best car I'd ever driven. It really is a beautiful car. It was the last handmade M car, and I had a great experience, and I gave the car back to him. He was very nice. So those ads were great. I thought he was great, and I love BMW in that era, and I just thought I'd share the story because they it was like coming together with this guy who's really into cars, and BMW was really emerging as a growth company, and they were taking kind of a leadership role in luxury automotive at that time. Obviously, they're doing a hell of a lot better than Jaguars or Aston Martin, and they really are leaders. And I think it started in the 80s, but it gathered momentum in the 90s. And Jim Mullen, who I haven't seen him since, was a part of it. By the way, Adams, I want to get your thoughts because you used to be in marketing, and yeah,
my eyes are dazzled by that. And if you want to go back to a couple of those visuals of the ads, I mean, it's just fantastic. Back when, well, I mean, there were several things that popped out when you said that, it was lined with the significant BMWs and the logo was there. You see, that is true salesmanship because he was advertising to get the advertising. And that's really like the core greatness of what is a little bit of showmanship and a little bit of salesmanship. And, if you go back to the Ogilvy School of Advertising and what he did with Volkswagen back in the day and 1,000 other accounts, it just happens that I remember the automotive one. But it was a very compelling, even the way it's laid out. The graphics are supported by the headline, this one being "Oh No," the other one was the M3, not just for enthusiasts, but by enthusiasts. That headline was aimed at a particular person. So they say that salesmanship happens one-to-one and marketing happens one to thousands. The most genius of the marketing people are still talking one-to-one. And those ads are specifically tailored to a person, a guy, a lady, or whomever, who is kind of on the cusp of making a decision. It's very persuasional copy, very fact-laden. The headline with the indented paragraphs The exact way that that's built is called advertorial, is the way that that's called. At the time, it kind of to mimic the way newspapers and a lot of magazines were written. So you almost at first glance could not tell if that was an ad or editorial, which is why they call them advertorial. But my gosh, it's just brilliant copy. I read both of these and was just salivating because it's just the way salesmanship should work. And I don't mean the sleazy salesmanship that you wake up with something you didn't mean to buy the day before, but I mean the true, the best definition I ever heard of selling was a transfer of enthusiasm.
Oh, I
And
like that.
I like
yeah,
that.
I've always thought that was strong. And
Yes.
this is a guy, a copywriting team, a graphics team that understands that to its core. And I look at ads today, and I'm sure Jim Mullen looks at ads today and goes, "Good Lord, what is it that they're trying to sell? What are they trying to promote?" And it frustrates me, not because I wish I was the one doing the copywriting, but just because the people who invested all this money trying to buy media are getting nowhere. This stuff got somewhere. It moved the needle. I'm going to say it was about as important as the product was during the time it was needed.
Yeah, another point is, life really does come down to people, and people really make a difference. Individuals make a difference. And I've always liked the idea, I heard a phrase decades ago, and I've always remembered it. And I think it applies here, and it applies to Jim Mullen. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to do something, who said if you're going to take Venice, take Venice? I mean, if you're going to do something, do it. And Jim Mullen obviously did it. He and his team, they said, we're doing this. We're going to give it everything we can. And if we don't get it, we're not going to regret that we didn't try hard enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's terrific. I wish ads were still just like that.
Yeah. I know.
No,
But
full speak. I mean, do you guys? I mean, to me, I feel like this would play right now. But people think, oh no, that's old school. We're not doing that. We're going to use image and symbolism. I mean, I look at this and go, just sell me something.
Stefan, you were a BMW guy. I mean, you're a fan back in the 90s.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always liked them. I've never owned one. I would like to have an earlier M5. I mean, when they're, or I do like that size sedan. I mean, basically, the size of the M5 back then was probably, I mean, it's be tiny at today's standards, but I think very well driving cars and a lot of fun. I drove my roommate's 320i in college a lot. Loved that car. That was just a blast to drive.
Yeah, I didn't own a BMW until recently because, we're all in the same boat. You can't really do too much. You got to raise your kids. But boy, it's a wonderful car, and I just was a huge fan in the 90s, the M cars in particular. I remember the first M5, I'm like, damn, that's so cool. And then the second M5, which I drove, I'm like, this is just as good as I thought it was going to be. It was amazing. And of course, the M3s that came up through the 2000s. And the one pictured here is the late 90s version. And E36 at 08, what people say that's Stefan.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
the
it's
the
like,
third generation, and it
But
was
that's
really a cool one. It was probably the least cool because it was the least M of all the M cars, but it still was cool. And I just thought it was great. Adams, I love how you say it's the transfer of enthusiasm because that's what it is, or passion.
Yeah, and I think, regardless of whether you follow maybe, my particular copywriting style or Jim's or, what just like Gary Halbert or Jay Abraham, those guys who were legendary copywriters, those guys are really steeped into the product. Just just act like you're excited about the thing you're offering. That's all I'm really asking. Just act like if you had the opportunity to own it, you would. Nothing frustrates me more than to be at maybe, I'm just picking on maybe a seafood restaurant. Oh, what do people like on and the waitress or the server will go, I hate seafood. And I'm thinking, what in
well, you can,
You know, if you're going to make a face when I order the grouper, please just, go work somewhere else. Anyway, I just want people to be enthusiastic and into the product. And in that particular era, Jim Mullen was enthusiastic and into the product, and I guarantee it was contagious. And another point, and I know I'm droning on about this, that M3 ad sold a hell of a lot of base 3 series.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
but talking about bringing it all back, we talked about car weight and BEVs and hybrids. The new M5 weighs 5,400 pounds. You can get an F-150 spec that weighs less than a BMW M5. Okay.
Wow, that's the point.
They
Wow.
said that the hybrid system added 800 and added over 800 pounds.
Good Lord.
I mean, we talked about weight and engineering. They tried to engineer a lightness in there. And that to me they have left the path of the spirit of the M car with that new M5. But
Yeah. Damn.
That's Floyd, you're not going to hear anywhere else, folks, that the M5 weighs more than the F-150 right there.
yeah, not
Mm,
my F-150, but you can get an F-150 spec'd
Right.
out at about 4,400 pounds.
Right. Wow.
all right. Well,
All right.
with that, let's wrap it up.
I will see you guys next year. So happy holidays to everybody. And remember to like, listen, subscribe, hit the bell button, and we'll see you sometime next year, guys.